Color, it's one of the first things that people notice, and one of the first things that a lot of designers get wrong. And it is not because they're bad designers, but because no one teaches color in a way that sticks. We are told to trust our eye, to pick a palette, or make it pop. I've been doing this design thing for a long time and I still don't know what that means. But color isn't guesswork. It is psychology, it's strategy, it's storytelling, and sometimes controlled chaos. So I made an entire series about what designers actually need to know to work with color. From building palettes to avoiding mistakes in your work, to understanding why some design just feels right. And in this video, you're getting all of it. No gatekeeping, no fluff, we're not here for that. Just a full system from start to finish. So let's get into it. Every time that someone says complementary colors, my designer soul leaves my body a little each time. School taught us the basics, which is cute, adorable even, but none of it prepared us for the decisions that designers actually make from day to day. Like, why does teal feel nostalgic? Why does pink feel expensive? Why does this brown make the whole design look like sadness on toast? And why do other palettes make your brain go like, that's really cozy, while others make you want to file a complaint? Today we are diving into real color theory, the juicy stuff, the stuff that makes your work look thoughtful, intentional, Pinterest-worthy, portfolio-ready. So grab a snack and let's dive into it. Let's start by talking about the emotional stuff. Because honestly, this is where color stops being color and starts becoming therapy. First, we have warm colors, the extroverts. Reds, oranges, yellow. They are the colors that walk into a room and they yell, "Hey bestie!" Warm colors represent things like energy, excitement, hunger, urgency. And that is why restaurants are like, yes, let's paint everything red so people get hungry and leave quickly. But okay, warm colors aren't always screaming. A musty orange, instant nostalgia, cozy sweater weather energy. Next up, let's talk about cool colors. The introverts, blues, green, purples. These are the colors that are like, okay, babe, just breathe. They are steady, calming, grounding. Brands love to use these colors to say, trust me, I am stable. We have our life together here. Even though sometimes they absolutely do not. And next up, let's talk about muted colors. Memory filters. Muted tones, they feel like old Polaroids. Childhood summers. The smell of books. A rainy Sunday tea. They hold emotion without yelling it. Perfect for storytelling and brand nostalgia. Okay, but we have to talk about neon colors. Neon colors equal chaos and confidence. Neon colors, if they could actually talk, they'd be that one friend who's like, okay, let's go skydiving at midnight. And they are extremely powerful, especially when you use them intentionally. One neon accent could elevate your palette instantly, but too much neon, suddenly your design is yelling at people like an energy drink commercial. Okay, but the real message here? Pick your emotional lane before you choose your color palette. It is like character development and storytelling. You have to know what the vibe is first. But next, we have to talk about color and temperature. Temperature is not just warm versus cool. It is direction, it is story. If you put a warm color next to a cool color, your eye will automatically see the warm color as closer. You could use it for things like focal points, hierarchy, depth and flat design, guiding the viewer's eye across the layout. And I know this video is about design, but this is actually something that I like playing with photography. I like using split toning to create like cool tones along with warm tones. I feel like it creates more of an interesting photo. The same thing could completely be done with graphic design too, though. It could be the very way that you create cinematic lighting in 2D design. And point number 2 that you should take away from this is that cool colors recede. Cool colors create breathing room, space, calmness. They make everything feel more elegant and soft. This is why a lot of luxury brands out there love using cool neutrals. Designers usually pick one temperature as home base, then use the opposite to create contrast. And what do I mean by this? An example would be if a brand is mostly cool toned, but then they have like warm gold accents. It gives the design a very classy look. And then there's the opposite of that, which is a mostly warm palette with an accent of blue. This is something that could feel modern and grounded. Or maybe there's a palette that is mostly neutrals with one vibrant color. This equals high energy aesthetic. Temperature is how designers create harmony without being boring. And next, let's talk about saturation and control. Saturation is literally the difference between, wow, this looks like a sophisticated editorial spread, and this looks like a clown festival poster. You could think of saturation as volume. High saturation, it's very loud, where low saturation is the opposite. It is very quiet. And you guys have heard me say it before, if everything is loud, then nothing stands out. But the opposite is true. If everything is quiet, then nothing is speaking. I'm going to let you in on the designer rule of 70, 20, 10. 70% low saturation tones. This is your base. 20% mid saturation. This is what you should use for your details. And 10% high saturation. What do you want to stand out? Maybe this is what clients mean when they ask you to make it pop. This makes your palette look curated rather than chaotic. And let's talk about the emotion behind saturation. High saturation is youthful and energetic. Low saturation is mature, elegant, nostalgic. Match your saturation to the personality of your project. Okay, but let's talk about color perception. Colors change depending on what's around them. This is why you pick a beautiful palette, use it in a design, and then all of a sudden, it looks wrong. Your brain does this weird thing where it like makes the blue look darker next to white, for instance. Makes a red look kind of orange when it's next to yellow. Makes your green look dirty when it's next to certain brown shades. My tip here is to not finalize your palette in the picker. Always test it in the design. Test it in large shapes, next to each other, in context, with your actual typography. Every designer will tell you, 90% of picking the right color is picking the wrong ones first. Let's talk about simultaneous contrast. When two colors sit side by side, your brain, it will naturally exaggerate the differences. This could be a disaster, or it could be a superpower. Use it to make accents pop. Create illustration depth. Make neutral tones feel richer or softer. So how do graphic designers choose a palette that feels intentional? Step 1, choose your vibe with words, not colors. Do you want your design to feel cozy, neutral? Or maybe you want it to feel bold and modern? Maybe you're going for something that's feminine or clean. Or is it vintage and cinematic? Is it sporty or youthful maybe? Or maybe you're going for that earthy luxury. Once you have your vibe, then pick the colors. Step number 2, pick your main color family. Pick a lane. Warm, cool, earthy, pastel, jewel tones, neutrals, maybe neons. This is your palette foundation. And step number 3, add an accent color. One color gets to be your pop. Just one. Every band needs one lead singer, right? It is the same with a color palette. Who is your lead? And step number 4, control your saturation. To avoid chaos, desaturate your base colors. Keep your pop color more intense. Avoid using a lot of high saturation tones unless the goal is for your design to feel youthful. And step number 5, add neutrals last. Neutrals balance the whole cast. White, black, gray, beige, olive, sand, charcoal. Neutrals make your palette feel real-world usable. And step number 6, test your palette. This could be a fake poster, a social media template, a brand card layout. Seeing your palette used in context eliminates bad decisions fast. Okay, here's a few examples of real-world color palettes in action. Let's say that you're going for a cozy cafe brand. A good idea would be warm neutrals and muted green, plus one saturated accent color. Or let's say that you're designing for a tech startup. A good idea for a tech startup would be cool blues with an off-white neutral, and maybe one neon accent for energy. Or let's say that you're designing for a luxury skincare brand. I would go for low saturation, soft tones, and maybe like a soft gold. Or let's say that you're designing for a kids brand. You need high saturation, rounded shapes, loss of energy, maybe some friendly contrast. Or let's say that you're designing for a vintage-inspired brand. I would go for maybe like dusty warm tones with a rich brown. Add in some creamy neutrals. Do you see how all of these look very intentional? It is because only one color is saturated. Okay, so let's talk about a few mistakes that a lot of beginners make. Mistake number 1, using too many saturated colors. I'm pretty sure by this point of the video you know what the fix is. Pick one saturated color. Mistake number 2, picking colors individually instead of using them in a group. The fix for this is to pick them all together in the start. Mistake number 3, ignoring temperature. The fix to this is to pick a base temperature and then use the opposite of that for accents. And mistake number 4, no neutrals. I feel like the fix for this is pretty obvious. Add a beige, a black, or a gray. And the final mistake, relying on the color picker instead of references. And the fix to this is very simple. Pull from nature, photography, mood boards. And that is the color theory that we should have learned in school. If I see one more infographic, one more, that says red means passion, blue means trust, yellow means happy, I might actually lose it. Because if color psychology was that simple, every brand would look the same. And yet, somehow, Coca-Cola and Netflix both use red. And it feels completely different. So what's actually going on here? Is color psychology fake? Is it manipulation? Is it cultural? Is it neuroscience? We're going deep today, and I owe you something. I started this color series, posted one video, and then I dropped it, which kind of feels illegal now because I know some of you are actually excited for it. So today we're going to cover the basics. So in the first video, we covered the basics, emotional associations, warm versus cool, all the surface level stuff of what designers actually use color theory for. And that foundation does matter. So after this video, go ahead and give that one a watch. But today, we are finally building on it. Because color emotion, it is not just a checklist. It is a system. Just to recap quickly, red equals passion or danger. Blue equals trust. Yellow equals happiness. Green equals nature. Purple equals royalty. Black equals luxury. And white, it equals purity. And none of that is wrong. It's just incomplete. And when we stop there, we flatten something that is actually incredibly complex. Color emotion is contextual, relational, cultural, historical, strategic. Designers who treat it like a Pinterest chart are missing the entire point. So what does red mean? It depends. Instead, think about it this way. Red on a stop sign, it equals danger. Where if you have red on a Valentine's Day card, it equals romance. If you use red in a luxury campaign, that equals seduction. And red on a clearance banner, that equals urgency. Red alone means nothing. And yet, red, when given context, means everything. Look at Target, for instance. Bold, approachable, mass appeal. Now look at YouTube, for instance. Attention-grabbing, urgent, digital. Same color family, different emotional architecture. Because color doesn't work alone, it works inside systems. And this isn't just theoretical. I just went through this with a client. Let's set the tone. The brand that I was working with, it was built around reflection, calm, stillness. The philosophy, it's structured around softness and restraint. Naturally, we want a color system that reflects that, right? Muted tones, quiet saturation, intentional, quiet. But someone funding the program wanted to introduce a very loud, vibrant, bright color. And on the surface, it sounds harmless. It's just a color, right? But a color is never just a color. In the first video, we did touch a little bit on how saturation actually affects emotional temperature, and high saturation introduces stimulation. It increases perceived energy. It pulls attention aggressively. So, introducing a loud, energetic color, it goes entirely against the brand that I'm mentioning now. A brand purely built on calmness, it wouldn't just introduce personality. It would shift the whole emotional foundation. This is where you elevate. When you introduce a color that affects the whole emotional core of the brand, you're not just referencing it, you're fragmenting it. Brand systems are ecosystems. Every color that you introduce, it has a role. And emotional consistency, it builds trust in your audience. We had to explain. Protecting the muted color palette, it wasn't just about personal preference. It was about brand alignment. Let that sit. Warm colors increase stimulation, raise heart rate slightly, feels closer. Whereas cool colors, they do the opposite. They feel spacious. It's lower perceived energy. It creates a form of distance. And fun fact, your brain, it actually processes color faster than it processes language, which means for brands that the color, it sets the emotional tone before the audience even reads. This is pre-verbal influence, not manipulation, preconditioning. Designers are emotional set designers. So why do luxury brands lean towards beige, taupe, black, or cream? It is not because these colors are inherently expensive. It is because restraint signals control. Muted palettes, they reduce visual noise. It creates distance. It signals exclusivity. Mass brands shout and luxury it whispers. And whispering feels more powerful because it doesn't compete. So, why does every tech startup default to blue? Because blue equals trust. It kind of became the design gospel. But here's the issue. When everyone uses blue to signal trust, it stops differentiating. Color psychology changes with market saturation. And that is very important. If everyone follows the same emotional formula, then the formula, it loses power. Now, let's talk about pairing colors. Red and gold could signal opulence. Red and white, that could signal clarity. Red and black, it's very aggressive. Or red and pink, that could signal romance. It is the same base, but different emotional outcome. Emotion lives in relationships. Design is relational, not isolated. So let's talk about high saturation. It signals things like youthful, loud, accessible, whereas low saturation, it feels very mature, very calm, expensive, controlled. Designers who ignore saturation are emotionally tone deaf. Yes, say that. Because, for instance, that bright color in my client's brand, it wasn't necessarily bad. It was just something that was emotionally incompatible to the brand. And that's the difference. Okay, and the thing you must remember as a designer. Colors on a screen emit light. They feel electric. And in print, the colors absorb light. It could feel more grounded. The same hue, it behaves differently across mediums. Emotion, it shifts with format. Okay, let's talk about the dark side of color. Sometimes brands will intentionally use colors to create urgency in sales, influence bad food choices, intentionally guide your eye movement, and increase conversations. Is it manipulation or is it communication? We have to always remember that design shapes behavior. The ethical question is how you intentionally use it. In the end, we protected the muted color palette. Not because designers are stubborn. I mean, we are. But actually, we did it because of emotional integrity. Color isn't just decoration, it is alignment. It is coherence. It is psychological consistency. So yes, color psychology is very real, but not in the way that those viral charts tell you it is. It's not as simple as red equals angry. It is red in this context with this system at this saturation level for this audience equals something very specific. So if someone tells you just make it blue because blue is trustworthy, I want you to ask, trustworthy to who? Let me say something that might hurt a little. If your design looks cheap, if it feels a little bit chaotic, if it screams student project, even though you technically did everything right, it might not be your typography. It might not be your layout. Might not even be the concept. It's probably your saturation. And I need us to talk about that because saturation is one of the most misunderstood, overused, and abused elements in graphic design when it comes to beginners. And the wild part, most people don't even realize that they're doing it. So today we're ranting, but we're ranting with a purpose. Quick fundamentals before I spiral. Every color has 3 core properties: hue, what the color is; value, how light or dark it is; and saturation, how intense or pure it is. Saturation is the intensity, is the purity, the how loud is this color yelling at me factor. A fully saturated red is bold, it's vibrant, it's almost aggressive. And a low saturated red, it suddenly becomes a little more rusty and dusted. Very muted, very sophisticated, very emotional. Same hue and completely different vibe. That's the power of saturation. Saturation doesn't change what the color is. It changes how the color behaves. And behavior really matters. Let's be honest. When you first open your design program, the color picker, it is intoxicating. Neon pink, yes. Electric blue, obviously. Highlighter yellow, why not? Because bright, it really feels exciting. It feels confident, it feels noticeable, it feels professional. But here's the hard truth. Beginners design for attention, and professionals, we design for control. If everything in your design is at 100% saturation, nothing stands out. It's like when you walk into a room and everyone is yelling. Technically, yes, you have everyone's attention, but no one is being heard. Hierarchy collapses when everything is screaming. You lose your focal points, you lose your balance. You lose subtlety. And subtlety is not a weakness, it's maturity. And this is where things get interesting. Saturation is emotional volume. High saturation, everything feels energetic, youthful, loud, urgent, playful, sometimes chaotic. And low saturation, it feels calm, mature, and nostalgic. It feels serious, premium, introspective. Notice how those are 2 completely different things. That is not an accident. Our brains respond to intensity. Think about Apple. This brand leans more towards neutral, controlled, refined. They aren't blasting hyper-saturated primaries everywhere. And this is because their brand identity is all about clarity and restraint. Now let's compare Apple to Nickelodeon. Bright orange, high energy, saturated. And it works because it aligns with children's entertainment and playfulness. The difference isn't bright equals bad and muted equals good. The difference is brand alignment. Saturation should match your audience's emotional expectation. If you're designing for a luxury skincare brand and your palette looks like a candy aisle, we might have a problem. If you're designing for a toy brand and everything is dusty, beige, and minimum, that is also a problem. Context is absolutely everything. Here's my rant. You could have beautiful typography, a clean grid structure, thoughtful composition, and if your colors are all fully saturated and competing with each other, that will make the design work feel very amateur. Why? Because oversaturation removes contrast of intensity. We always talk about contrast in terms of light versus dark. But intensity contrast is just as important. If your background is vivid blue and your headline is vivid red, your accents are like a vivid green and your CTA is like a vivid yellow, your design is visually exhausted. There is no breathing room. Design needs tension and release, loud and quiet, sharp and soft. When everything is loud, then your eye doesn't know where to land. And when the eye is confused, then the brain just labels it as messy, even if it technically isn't. And that's the part that hurts, especially when you're pouring hours of your life into a project. Let's get slightly nerdy. High saturation increases stimulation. Our brains interpret intense colors as important. This thing is urgent and attention-worthy. If everything looks urgent, then your viewer experiences cognitive overload. They won't articulate that, but they will feel uncomfortable. And then they'll scroll faster and disengage. This is especially relevant in digital design. Websites, social feeds, ads. Users already feel overwhelmed. If your brand is visually screaming full volume all the time, people will burn out. Sometimes desaturated palettes feel premium because they really don't demand your attention. They allow the user to approach them. And psychologically, being invited feels better than being grabbed. Okay, deep breath. Solutions. Number 1. Pull back 15 to 30%. Take your primary colors and reduce the saturation slightly. Not too gray, just down a bit. You will be so shocked at how instantly refined it feels. Most beginners overshoot intensity, and professionals, we trim it back. Number 2, saturate selectively. Choose one element to carry high intensity. Your CTA, your headline. Maybe it's a focal point in the illustration. Let that one area shine, and everything else should support it instead of competing with it. Number 3, introduce neutrals. Neutrals are not boring. They are structure. Soft grays, off-whites, muted tones. These all create breathing room. Breathing room makes bold colors feel more intentional. And number 4, consider emotional temperature. Ask yourself, is this design meant to feel calm, playful, authoritative? Is it romantic? Is it edgy? And adjust the saturation accordingly. Don't just pick colors because they look cool in the picker. Pick them because they feel right for the message. If you've ever done photo editing, you know the temptation. The vibrance slider is so seductive. You bump it up and then suddenly the sunset looks so dramatic. The greens are glowing, the sky is electric. For about 5 seconds, it feels so amazing. And then you notice it starts to look fake. Oversaturation in photography destroys skin tones first. And us as humans are extremely sensitive about our facial color. When our skin looks unnaturally intense, it's not a cute look. We subconsciously register it as artificial. Subtle adjustments almost always win. The goal is enhancement, not explosion. Real life has nuance, and when your edits remove that nuance, it removes all credibility. And credibility is absolutely everything when it comes to branding. Okay, I have to say this. There is like this unspoken idea that muted palettes are boring and vibrant palettes feel more creative. And I personally believe that's not true. Creativity is not measured in how bright your colors are. It's measured by intention. Sometimes the most emotionally powerful pieces are heavily desaturated. Think about nostalgia, think about memory, think about softness. Are pieces that carry that less creative? No. Intensity is just one tool, it's not the whole toolbox. And when designers rely only on intensity, to me, it reveals insecurity rather than innovation. Okay, there, I said it. I said what I said. Here's what I want you to do. Open an old project. Really look at it and ask yourself, where am I yelling? Is everything competing? Where could I have lowered the volume slightly? Design isn't about making everything louder. It's about making a conscious decision about what deserves to be loud. Saturation is control, it's emotional direction, it's hierarchy, it's brand psychology. And once you start paying attention to it, then you see it everywhere. You'll start to notice when brands overdo it. And you'll start to notice when things feel refined. You'll start to notice when design feels calm versus chaotic. Because saturation isn't just a slider, it is emotional strategy. And mastering it, that's when your work starts to not look like student work. That's when your work starts looking really intentional. It's emotional strategy. Your work will look smarter, not louder. And that kind of shift, it changes everything. Have you ever walked into a room and it immediately felt cozy? Or maybe sterile? Or a bit weird, and you couldn't quite put your finger on why? That wasn't furniture, and it's definitely not the layout. That was color temperature. And here's the thing. I know color temperature, it sounds like something that only photographers would care about, but really, it's emotional warfare. Designers use color all the time to make you feel warm, cool, hungry. safe, excited, you name it. Sometimes all of the above. Warm colors sell you coffee. Cool colors sell you tech startups. And if you mix them up or use them wrong, then you accidentally sell confusion. So today's video is all about color temperature. What it is, why it matters, why beginners ignore it, and why it might be actually one of the most powerful tools in graphic design. Let's get into it. Color temperature at its simplest. Warm colors, red, orange, yellow. Cool colors, blue, green, purple. That's it. But it's not just a color wheel thing. It actually comes from light and nature. Firelight, warm. Sunlight, warm. Golden hour, warm. And when you think of shadows in nature, what do you think about? You think about cool. Water, cool. Nighttime, you guessed it, cool. Now here's the fun twist. Scientifically, blue flames burn hotter than red flames. But emotionally, humans perceive red as hotter and blue as cool. And that perception matters in design. Design is not physics, design is psychology. Warm colors, they feel loud, energetic, passionate, urgent, sometimes very aggressive, whereas cool colors, they feel calm, safe, controlled, clean, trustworthy, distant. And that is why fast food brands lean towards warm colors. Think about McDonald's, red and yellow. That's very energetic. It is very loud and appetite stimulating. Now let's think about social media and tech. Facebook, blue. It symbolizes things like trust, stability, familiarity. Even Apple leans more towards cool and neutral. And that is because it's clean, controlled, and premium. None of this is random. If a spa used a color like red, you would feel stressed before you even walked in. Temperature directs emotion before typography even has a chance. This is where I get ranty. When I was in design school, there was a lot of emphasis placed on artistic expression. But in marketing design, temperature is strategic. You are choosing the climate for your audience. Wellness brands of today often use neutrals, earthy beiges and clay tones, soft terracottas. It feels human, organic, and grounded. And luxury brands, they often use cooler, often saturated tones. Deep navy, charcoal, cool grayscales. It feels controlled and exclusive. And tech startups usually use cool blues, cyan, and clean gradients. Coffee shops, warm browns, deep rusty colors, and creamy yellows. And what's interesting about all of this is that trends usually shift. A few years ago, everything was super minimal and icy cool. And now we're seeing warmer, earthier palettes everywhere. Design trends are literally temperature cycles. And when brands get this wrong, it tends to feel very off, even if you can't really explain why. Temperature is not just branding, it's visual storytelling. Let's take a look at the Matrix. Everything in the simulated world has this cool green tint. It feels artificial, detached, and controlled. Now let's look at Mad Max Fury Road. We get like this intense orange desert heat. It gives you just this internal feeling that you're in a world that's violent, relentless. Or even look at Breaking Bad where you get those yellow desert tones. That gives you like this feeling of tension, heat, and moral decay. So you could think about it like warm equals intensity, whereas cool equals distance. The reason I'm bringing up film right now is because it's the most direct way that I could give you an example about how temperature really guides our emotions scene by scene. Designers can and should do the same. Now let's talk about mistakes. Mistake number 1, using all warm colors at full saturation. If everything is warm and loud, your design screams. There is no breathing room for your viewer. Mistake number 2, mixing warm and cool without intention. If you ever see a design where something feels slightly off and you can't really put a finger on what exactly that is, it's often that there's a temperature conflict. Like, I don't know, an example could be like a super cool blue background with maybe a really warm orange red headline that just doesn't belong together. Like, you get what I mean? Like, it's not in harmony at all. And mistake number 3, ignoring context. A color that feels warm on your laptop will feel completely different when you print. Lighting affects temperature perception, and the surrounding colors shift your perception. Temperature is relational. It doesn't exist in isolation. And here's where we get a little bit deeper. Not all blues are cool. There are warm blues, like blues that lean slightly more towards purple. And there are cool reds, ones that lean slightly towards magenta. Even neutrals have temperature. Beige, it could be warm or cool. Even gray could be warm or cool. White could be warm or cool. This is where designers level up. You stop thinking about colors like simply as what color is this, and start thinking instead what temperature bias does this color have, because a warm gray next to a cool gray could clash subtly. And subtle clashes are what separates amateur from intentional design. Temperature contrast could also create depth. Warm colors tend to advance, and cool colors, they tend to recede. That's why landscapes work. Warm foreground, cool background, instant depth. You could use color temperature in this way to create hierarchy without changing the size of anything at all. That's power. When I first started designing, I mainly focused on hue contrast. Is it readable? Is it bold enough? Is it loud enough? Does it pop? But over time, especially working in marketing, I started noticing how temperature changes the entire mood of a project. Even living in Malaysia versus growing up in Santa Fe, the environmental palettes are different. Tropical environments, it tends to feel more warm and saturated, whereas the Southwest desert has those dusty, warm neutrals. Like, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like those adobe tones and the sun-baked clay. And environment shapes taste. And whenever I'm designing now, I always ask, what's the emotional climate that I'm designing for? Is the brand warm and welcoming, or is it more cool and authoritative? Maybe it's balanced. Temperature is the first decision that I make now. Color temperature isn't just warm versus cool. It is emotional direction. It's psychological framing. It's atmosphere. Every time that you are designing, you are creating the emotional climate that someone is stepping into. So next time that you feel something from a brand, a website, or a movie, pause and ask yourself, is it warm or cool? Because once you start training yourself to notice temperature, you really can't unsee it. And once you can control it, then you're not just choosing colors anymore. You're controlling the weather. Okay, I'm not the only one, right? Sometimes you see a design and something just feels off. Like, not bad, not broken, just wrong. It's like the colors are fighting each other. Like, they met 5 minutes ago and they already want to file for divorce. And the worst part is you can't always explain why. But here's the truth that no one tells you when you first start graphic design. Color palettes are not just about picking the colors that you like. It's all about building relationships. If your color palette has no relationship system, no hierarchy, no intention, no logic, your design will always feel a little bit off, even if everything else is perfect. So today, I'm telling you how to fix that. Because if you ever sat in front of your screen and started using the color picker like you're speed dating hex codes, hoping that something magically works, yeah, we're done with that era. Let's start with the biggest misconception. People think that a color palette is just a set of colors. It's not. A color palette is a system. The moment that you start treating it like a system instead of a Pinterest mood board, everything changes. Because a strong color palette doesn't just look good, it behaves well. They do things like guiding the eye, creating contrast, telling the viewer what visually matters. Color palettes can make your design feel intentional. And intention? That's the difference between amateur and professional work. So how do we actually build one? First, you need a role system, not just vibes, not just like, oh, this is cute. Roles, your primary, your secondary, and your accent. You can think of your primary color like your anchor. This is the one that does the heavy lifting. And your secondary, it's there for support. It adds variation without stealing the spotlight. And your accent, that's the color that is here for the drama. When that color shows up, it makes a statement. And then just as quickly, it leaves before it overstays its welcome. If everything in your color palette is an accent, congratulations, you made visual noise. Now here's where people start spiraling. They start asking questions like, how many colors should I use? And I am going to say something slightly controversial. It is not about the number of colors. It is about control. You could have 5 colors and a complete disaster. You could have 12 and it will look like a masterpiece. The difference is whether those colors work well together, or are they just coexisting aggressively? Let's talk about harmony for a second. Because yes, color theory exists. You could use complementary, analogous, triadic systems, whatever works. And yes, those are very helpful. But if you rely on them blindly, then your work starts to feel predictable. It starts to feel safe, a little bit like every design tutorial on the internet. So instead of asking, do these colors follow the rules? You need to be asking things like, do they feel like they belong together? Because real-world color palettes are rarely ever perfect color wheel diagrams. They're slightly off, slightly unexpected, and that's the very thing that makes them interesting. Now here's where things get fun, because color palette building isn't just about choosing colors. It is about building contrast, and contrast is where most design quietly fails, because designers think that contrast means light versus dark. And that's part of it. But real-world contrast is about difference in purpose. If everything in your design has the same visual weight, then your viewer doesn't know where to look. So you need a palette that will create dominance, subordination, aka what supports it, and emphasis. What do you want to send out? Without that, your design is just existing. Let me give you a really quick reality check moment. If you turn your design into grayscale right now, does it still work? If your answer is no, that means that your palette is doing too much of the heavy lifting. And I don't mean that in a good way. Because strong design, it works in black and white first. Color is the enhancement, not a crutch. Now let's talk about a mistake I see constantly, and I mean constantly. Designers picking color at straight up full saturation, like the most intense version of every color. And then they sit back and wonder why it looks like everything is yelling. Here's the thing. Most professional color palettes live in a muted, controlled space. Not dull, not boring, controlled. Because when everything is loud, then nothing is loud. But when your color palette is mostly calm, then that one bold accent, it hits so much harder. This is why tools like tint, shade, and tone are your best friends. Instead of adding more colors, you could expand them by adjusting them. Lighter, darker, softer. And suddenly your 3-color palette, it feels like 10. All without losing cohesion, of course. Now let's get a little more conceptual. Because palette building, it isn't just technical, it's emotional. Colors carry meaning, and not just like red equals danger and blue equals calm. It could be cultural, contextual, personal. A deep forest green, it could feel luxurious in one project, and then it could feel outdoorsy in another. A soft pink, it could feel romantic, or it can feel corporate depending on how you use it. So when you build a palette, you need to ask, what does it feel like? Not just simply what looks good, because design is communication, and color is one of your loudest voices. Let's talk about workflow for a second, because I know you're probably wondering, okay, what do I actually do to start a palette? And here's a simple approach. Start with one color, not 5, not 10, just one, your anchor. Then build around it intentionally. Add a supporting color that doesn't compete. Then finally add an accent to create tension. And once you have those 3, stop, pause, test them. Because this is another mistake. People build color palettes in isolation. They don't apply them. And then you sit down and design and throw your colors into a layout and you realize they don't work. Use them in typography, backgrounds, UI elements. Because a color palette that looks good in swatches could immediately fall apart when you put it to use. And if it all falls apart, good, then that means that you caught it early. Adjust, refine, repeat. Palette building isn't a one and done decision. It tends to be iterative. Now let's address the elephant in the room. What about trends? Because we all know it, every year there's a new it palette. Muted pastels, high saturated neons, earth tones, digital lavender. That one was my favorite. Whatever is having its moment. And look, trends are fun, they're useful, but if your entire palette is built on trends, your design will age like Cloud Dancer. So instead of chasing trends, use them as seasoning, not the whole meal. Here's another perspective shift that might change your life a little bit. Your palette isn't just for looking, it's for functioning. I cannot stress this enough in digital design. Accessibility, it really matters. Contrast ratios matter. Readability matters. Because if your beautiful palette makes text impossible to read, it's not a good palette. That's a pretty problem. So now that we've talked about roles, contrast, emotion, and workflow, let's tie it all together. A strong palette has clear roles, creates contrast, feels cohesive, supports the message or works in real application, and most importantly, it feels intentional. Because at the end of the day, people might not be able to articulate why your design feels good. They won't say like, oh, I love how the accent color creates visual hierarchy. No, they just feel it. They trust it. They engage with it. And that is the goal as a designer. So next time that you sit down and you build a palette, don't just choose colors. Build relationships, build structures, build attention. Because once you do that, you'll stop guessing. And that's when you really start designing. And honestly, that's where it gets really fun. And that's everything. If you made it all the way to this, first of all, I am impressed. Second of all, your relationship with color is probably very different now. And that is the goal. Because good design isn't just about making things look nice. It is about making intentional choices in your work. People could feel it even if they don't understand why. Color is one of your most powerful tools. And now, you actually know how to use it. If this helped you, or if you're planning on revisiting some parts later, go ahead and save this video. You will thank yourself mid-project at 2 a.m. And if you want more content like this, design breakdowns, creative rants, or the occasional reality check, you already know what to do. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!